on a bare hilltop, call up an army against Babylon. Raise a signal flag on a bare hilltop, call up an army against Babylon. Wave your hand to encourage them. Wave your hand to encourage them. As they march into the palaces of the high and mighty. I, the Lord, have dedicated these soldiers for this task. Yes, I have called mighty warriors to express my anger. Yes, I have called mighty warriors to express my anger. And they will rejoice when I am exalted.
Hello, good afternoon. Katherine Albrecht here. Thrilled to be with you. Hopefully everything's working today. If you want to head over to YouTube, I have the chat room open in a window that hopefully I can access both my Katherine-Albrecht.com chat and the YouTube chat. So head on over. This is the Dr. Katherine Albrecht Show. You can find us hopefully live streaming on YouTube. So today, here's what I want to talk about. Last night, I was a guest on John B. Wells' Caravan to Midnight program. And if you know John, he's got this great, just made for radio announcer voice. I first met John because he was the weekend host on Coast to Coast AM, which used to be Art Bell and for years has been George Norrie. And on the weekends, it was John B. Wells. So I got to know John from there. He has his own radio program, Caravan to Midnight. He also has something called ARC Radio that is on Saturday nights. I've yet to be on there. But last night, I had my third hour-and-a-half long Caravan to Midnight. They call it that because it runs from 10:30 to midnight Eastern time. I had my third interview with John, and it's getting really interesting. I learned every time I go on his show, they have me fill out what do they call it, a guest booking form. And on the booking form, you put all the usual information, like your email address and your websites and your YouTube address and your Facebook and all of those kinds of details. And then you have space to put what you want as a guest that you want to talk about. So I have a million things, a million things to talk about. But his program is paranormal, based on the paranormal. I believe he is the fourth largest or one of the top three paranormal programs in the country, and right up there with Coast to Coast. And as I was thinking about this third interview, that I'm scheduled for another one, by the way, October 16th, if you want to tune in for that. Hopefully I will remember and let you guys know when I'm here to tune in the evening with the Listen Live link. I'll post it. But I was thinking, what do I talk about? So I've already talked about the general premise of my book. He had me on as a regular guest discussing radio frequency ID, RFID, which that... the topic that I stumbled into as a graduate student at Harvard, taking classes at the MIT Media Lab, and discovered horrible plans by some of the biggest corporations on the globe to put tracking devices into all of their consumer goods and track us around with them nonstop. And anyway, so that became the book Spy Chips. That became the activism that I did there. And of course, when he had me back after, 7-8 years of not being on the show, he said, "So what's going on?" And I said, "Well, a lot." We can't cover it all in an hour and a half. But I have been working on health issues with solar fields to power data centers to create artificial intelligence. And I'm working on a book, and I've got a deliverance ministry that we're launching here at our church, and just a ton of stuff going on. Well, long story short, last night, yesterday, as I'm filling out the booking form, thinking, I have so many things to talk about. Which one do I want to discuss? And I thought, well, they're a paranormal show. I will talk about the Anunnaki. Have you guys heard about these? The Anunnaki. This is Chariots of the Gods back in 1968. I don't have his name off the top of my head, but came out with a book called Chariots of the Gods. And my parents had a copy of that book, the paperback, I don't know that they ever read it. I don't know, but it seemed like every household had a copy of Chariots of the Gods. It became a movie, a TV show. Everybody was talking about it. And up until recently, I didn't really know what Chariots of the Gods had to say, other than that a lot of the unusual things that were created in antiquity that were perhaps beyond human capability or thought to require modern technology and earth moving equipment, like the pyramids and and Stonehenge and the Easter Island statue things and all of these other structures that are difficult for modern humanity to figure out how they did those things. This guy had come out with a theory that there was an ancient race of cosmonauts, I don't know, astronaut, whatever you want to call them, but an ancient race of people from beyond the stars who had come to the planet Earth and established the human race, created us and our DNA and put us here, and then gave us these incredibly advanced levels of technology that far exceed anything we even have today. That theory, which was one guy in 1968, has since gone on to spawn a whole genre of conspiracy theories and books and movies, and a whole lot of people talking about this idea that we were somehow put here, that the biblical story isn't what happened. It was outer space people, or, well, outer space, I don't know what you want to call them, gods, right? So the intersection here is that as I have been researching my book, and looking at the history of technology from the beginning, from the very early days of civilization, I discovered in the course of that research that civilization essentially got started in Sumeria, ancient Sumeria, which is currently where modern-day Iraq is located. And ancient Sumeria was pretty much forgotten. Modern humankind, I guess, for a couple thousand years, forgot that they even existed. We had references to them biblically, and some kind of floating around thoughts that they had been there, but we really had not found them or didn't even know if they were real. And then in the 1800s, archaeologists began digging in Iraq. They found the ancient city of Ur. If you know your Old Testament history and have read your book of Job and the history of Abraham, then you know Ur, U-R, is the city that Job lived in when he went through all of his trials. And it's also the city that God called Abraham out of when he said, go to a new land, I'll show you. You have no idea where you're going. Just trust me. Head on out, and I will make you a father of many nations. And of course, Abraham is now the father of, I don't know, more than half the people on the planet, on planet Earth, the Muslims, the Jews, and of course the Christians. So that land of Ur, no one knew where it was for, I don't know, a couple thousand years. Nobody had any clue. And then it was discovered that the land of Ur was in Sumeria, and this whole civilization got dug up and uncovered. In the course of doing that, of course, the British Museum was doing a lot of that, so they were grabbing the antiquities and putting them on boats and sending them back to England, and a lot of this is still in the British Museum today. The cache, C-A-C-H-E, the collection of cuneiform tablets, and this is, at some point, now that I've got the cameras right, my camera's not centered. Yeah, I know my camera's not centered. I'll fix it. I was trying to do that right before the show. I got little messages here going, you're almost right. But at some point, once I'm absolutely sure I can center my camera, I can keep my mic unmuted, and I can go live on YouTube, then my next step is I'm going to have little images here. So here, those of you on YouTube will see this. See this little break? Please stand by. That's a little button I can click. For those of you listening through radio, I have a little yellow Post-it note that says, please stand by, that I put instead of my face during the breaks, so I can, drink a cup of coffee and not need to be on all the time. So I put up my little please stand by. But in the same way, I can load images into there. I can put videos in there. I can put music in there. I can put clips. I can put websites. I can put a lot of different things. So that's going to be my next one of my next projects. I think it's going to make the shows a lot better, because oftentimes when I'm talking to you about things like cuneiform tablets, I want to be able to show it to you. A cuneiform tablet is the earliest form of writing. It is the earliest form of recording speech, recording words, concepts, ideas, numbers, transactions, contracts onto a form that is not just verbal. And they had these clay tablets. They would roll out clay, and while it was still wet, they took styluses and they put little patterns in there. So you've probably seen them. They are, I don't know, they look like very complex patterns of lots of images, but tens of thousands of those were uncovered and wound up in the British Museum. And as we've deciphered them, we've learned a lot. And I'll tell you about that and how it ties in with Caravan to Midnight and the paranormal right after this. Stay tuned. And here goes.
Email programs free? Companies use them as bait to lure people into their system so they can scan their data and sell them to advertisers. It's like a hotel giving out free rooms so they can film people sleeping and then sell the video. You'd never agree to that. StartMail restores your privacy. No one but you sees your sensitive data, and it costs less than a postage stamp a week. StartMail.com. It's email you can trust. Your email is your business, but if it's spied on, hacked, or intercepted, it can fall into the wrong hands. The solution is encryption, a high-tech way to scramble your data so no one can read it. For years, only the technical elite could use this powerful tool until StartMail came along. StartMail not only lets you encrypt the email you send, it encrypts your entire account. Encryption. It's just one more way StartMail.com keeps you safe.
Hi, this is Joe Jaquin, owner of the Patriot Trading Group. I'm sure you're probably aware of the reputations of many of the precious metals dealers here in the Front Range. I talk to customers all the time that know gold and silver are strong investments, that they are a hedge against a volatile economy. But these customers don't know where to buy gold and silver and are very justifiably concerned that they'll get ripped off. So I want to make you this promise. At Patriot Trading Group, there are no commission salespeople. We don't make outbound phone calls. We don't try to upsell you into some scam or package that we created. We don't disclose your information to anyone ever. The majority of our business comes from referrals and long-time repeat customers. If you're looking to learn about or invest in precious metals, give us a call at 800-951-0592 or go to allamericangold.com. That's 800-951-0592 or go to allamericangold.com. The Patriot Trading Group. No salespeople, no calls, just old-fashioned service.
How we change the world. Have we forgotten that's how we change the world? The king will say, when I was thirsty, you gave me a drink.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. Oh my gosh. I'll get it. Wouldn't it be nice to just have all this be automated? It'd be great. My apologies to the people people listening on YouTube for whom I was just muted, but I fixed it. I was talking about Chariots of the Gods being written by Eric von Daniken, and thanking Stacy Lynn for that information. So, all right, well, let me get back to what I was talking about with Chariots of the Gods. So the Anunnaki, Anunnaki, it's got a strange spelling. The Anunnaki were the pantheon of false gods or idols that the ancient Sumerians worshipped. And we didn't really know this until we were able to decipher their cuneiform tablets. And what we discovered is that in addition to being the first to create technologies like the wheel and agriculture and writing and libraries and metallurgy and pretty much all of the technologies that we associate with civilization, irrigation and the plow and animal husbandry and cities and architecture, all of that came from the Sumerians. This is what's completely fascinating, and why the Anunnaki myth is such a popular myth, is that they themselves, in their literature, what I was going to say is, in addition to all of that, they also had just an amazing literary tradition. They had poems, and they wrote these long epics. The Epic of Gilgamesh might be one that you've heard of. All of that is from Sumeria, and was all recorded on those cuneiform tablets, which actually have stood the test of time far better than our technologies would. Paper tends to crumble away. It's amazing we have the Dead Sea Scrolls that we do, because they were put in clay pots and kept in very dry caves for a long time. Not kept there, but they were preserved in those caves. But the cuneiform tablets, my gosh, you can even drop them on the ground, break them, and scientists can still archaeologists can put them back together again and see what they had to say. So from that, we learned that they had a pantheon of gods, and that they themselves did not recognize, they didn't see themselves as tremendous innovators and inventors and super brilliant, able to figure things out. They viewed themselves as slaves of the gods. And they attributed all of their incredible technology to things that they were instructed by their gods to build. In one of the, I have it in one of these windows, I'll bring it up on the next break. In one of their epic poems, this is the one about essentially the equivalent of Noah's flood. They talk about how God regretted having created humanity, their God, and sent a flood to wipe them out. And in that epic, it talks about how the gods themselves grew weary, they grew tired, they were overburdened, they were laboring to give mankind all of its technologies, all of its gifts, all of its stuff. And they had kind of a rebellion in the heavens among these, these kind of human-like gods, argued amongst themselves and said, we don't want to continue doing this, so put the yoke, like a yoke on oxen, put the yoke on humankind, let them do the work, so we can just kick back and enjoy the fruits of their labor. And that is how the Sumerians viewed their technological breakthroughs, as having been almost put on them as a burden by these gods who were too lazy to do it themselves. So those gods are the Anunnaki. That's a term that they actually gave them, Anunna, and then the plural is Anunnaki. So that's where we get the term, if you've ever heard it. So here I'm going to go on John B. Wells' Caravan to Midnight program, knowing that if I just mention the word Anunnaki, it'll probably have a lot of people going, oh, what is she going to have to say about it? And what I had to say about it is that I believe, as did Eric von Daniken, do I have that right? Yeah, Eric von Daniken, that I also believe that the technologies of the Sumerians were given to them by other beings, by non-human beings. The difference is that I don't believe they were ancient astronauts or another race from outer space. I believe that they were actually just demons, just plain old, regular, everyday demons. And who's to say that demons and aliens from outer space aren't one and the same? who even knows? I'm not even sure that I believe in aliens from outer space, but a lot of people who report having seen them report something an awful lot like demons. And the few times in my childhood that I actually read about UFOs, because it was really a big deal in the 70s, I read about those UFOs and I had skin crawling, goosebumpy creeps, like at the deepest level. And the only other time I've had that experience of feeling that yucky about a particular topic and that, not like disgusted, not like scared, but like supernaturally creeped out, is when I have been, looking into things that are demonic. So somehow I think there's a big overlap there. But regardless, I don't attribute all of those ancient Sumerian technologies to Anunnaki coming in on spaceships and giving them, chariots of the gods coming in from the sky and giving them all these things. But it does fit with the premise of my book that the deal that was struck in the Garden of Eden by, Satan and Adam and Eve was the deal that they would eat the forbidden fruit that would give them the knowledge that is both good and evil to have the powers of God. And it's the simplest thing in the world to me to make that connection. What is the knowledge that gives human beings the power of God? Well, technology, right? That's the knowledge. If you don't have the wheel and you get the knowledge of the wheel, then voila, you're that much closer to being like God. Now you can move things around, whereas previously you couldn't. Same is true for all sorts of things, right? Developing metal, developing writing, the ability to communicate over time, which is what writing is. It lets me write something down, and 10 years later, day later, years later, whatever, thousands of years later, in our case, you can still read it. So the power to record your thoughts, the power to transmit them over long distances, which we have had since 1841, when or is it 44? No, they're all running together. But in the early 1840s, when Samuel Morse introduced the telegraph, we developed for the very first time the ability to transmit thoughts at a distance across the Atlantic Ocean to England, from there to Cape Cod in Massachusetts, at the Marconi Station. I've been there. So all of these abilities that God has to communicate at a distance, to know all things, to see all things, we have been replicating I believe, for Satan, because that was the deal we struck. The fruit of the knowledge of good and evil meant that he would provide humankind with knowledge, and that knowledge would be used to develop power. And lo and behold, here we are. So it was. So this is what we talked about last night on the show, and I wanted to share it here about the chariots of the gods, the Anunnaki. That I'm sure somebody will probably point to that and go, "See, Catherine's." She's a believer in all that. It might be just as bad that people will point and say, she believes that demons gave us technology, but I don't believe that it was outer space aliens who did that. So I'll pull it up after the break. I'm going to read you some of the literature from the ancient Sumerians addressing their belief that the gods had done this created this for them. The one thing I didn't get to last night, if anybody was listening to last night's show on Caravan to Midnight, is the two major gods in the Sumerian pantheon. They are Enki, E-N-K-I, and Enlil, E-N-L-I-L. Enlil has been likened to Yahweh, to God the Father, the Alpha and the Omega. And Enki, who is the god of mischief and basically technology, they didn't have a word for it, but the god of craftsmanship and knowledge and intelligence and mischief and evil, is Enki. And Enki is the one who enslaved humankind in the Sumerian mythology. He's the one who put humans in a position to have to build the stuff for them, which obviously fits with my understanding of Satan. But here's the thing. When I went to look up Enki and Enlil to learn a little bit more about these two entities, what did I find? But Enki.com and Enlil.com are both websites that have been registered to companies by those names, both of which develop and disseminate artificial intelligence. So kind of interesting. I have been noticing, and I've been noticing this for decades now, that you pick the most evil of mythological characters. You pick the most evil of demons. You pick horrible figures from mythology and from history. And you go online and you look them up, and half the time you find that you can't even find what you want to learn about them through Wikipedia or through archaeology or wherever, because you are bombarded on the website with the commercial websites of a company that's named itself that. So we see this across the board. A lot of security companies have taken on the names of demons. And I don't know, I think I'm going to include a chapter on that. Not a chapter, but probably just a couple paragraphs on that in my book of all of the weird companies, or, well, the companies are all weird, but companies who have weirdly named themselves after dark things like Enki.com. I don't think I'd be doing that. All right, be right back. Stay tuned.
Is your email box overrun with spam? With a StartMail account, you'll never have to give your real email address to a stranger again. Online shopping, newsletter subscriptions, getting that 30% off coupon, they all need your email address. But with StartMail, you can invent new addresses or aliases linked to your inbox behind the scenes and give those out to people while keeping your real address hidden. It's just one more protection from StartMail.com.
Red alert, Yahoo users. You've fallen in a trap that could ruin your life if you keep using Yahoo.
You consent to sharing all data in your email account with our AI providers, and you grant us a perpetual license to use, display, publish, and publicly distribute your content in any media known now or in the future, and to let other users access and distribute it as well.
Yikes. It's time to switch to StartMail, the only email that's AI-free and private by design. StartMail.com. Use promo code JD.
All of your electronic devices can be severely damaged by lightning bolts and power surges. Even worse, an EMP attack can destroy everything, leaving our technology-dependent society with no technology. But don't let that be you. Go to 1360khnc.com and click on the blue Natural Health Products button, and then scroll down to EMP Shield. EMP Shield is an electromagnetic pulse solar flare and lightning protection system made to protect you and your electronics. Go to 1360khnc.com and click on the Natural Health Products button at the top of the page.
Did you know you can purchase all of the products Julie uses and promotes on her Created to Heal radio show at 1360khnc.com? All the Gano Cafe mushroom infused coffee and teas, and all of the Nature's Sunshine products as well. Products such as Silver Shield, Clean Start, Ultrabiome Detox, and all the other products Julie talks about. Just go to 1360khnc.com and click on the Natural Health Products button, 1360khnc.com.
Back in the USSR.
Socialism, like the ancient ideas from which it springs, confuses the distinction between government and society. As a result, every time we object to a thing being done by government, the socialists conclude we object to it being done at all. We disapprove of state education, and the socialists say we are opposed to any education. Socialism. Frederick Bastiat, The Law.
Back in the USSR.
Most people think they can't afford to invest in gold and silver. But at the Patriot Trading Group, we believe that everyone should have the opportunity to own hard assets. That's why we created our Preferred Metals program. You can get started for as little as $100 a month. Go to allamericangold.com and click on our Preferred Metals icon to learn how you can get started today. Or call us at 800-951-0592, the Patriot Trading Group, allamericangold.com.
Is fathered by God and has intimate knowledge of Him. This is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son down to us so we might finally live through Him. This is how we know that we live in Him, and He in us, He's given us His Spirit. Let us love one another, love one another. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in
Rianne, R.I.
This is how this made complete among us. So
Not enough songs by her. I love the ones I have. All right, so I have it here. It is the Epic of Atrahasis, Atrahashis, the Epic of Atrahasis. It's long, it's detailed, and it's pretty impressive to me that they managed to take this entire, like, Shakespearean length. It's not quite that long, but this lengthy epic and write it out by pressing little tiny patterns, and it's quite extraordinary. But here's what it says. The beginning. I'll read you the introduction. This text is known from several versions. Two were written by Assyrian scribes, one in Assyrian, one in the Babylonian dialect. A third one on 3 tablets was written during the reign of King Ammi-Suduka of Babylonia. Parts were quoted in tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Other influences are, etc., etc. These texts can be used to reconstruct the lost parts of the Epic of Atrahasis. And yeah, so here's the summary. It's got a couple bullet points where archaeologists have sort of summarized what it says. It talks about the conditions immediately after the creation. The lower gods have to work very hard and start to complain. Now let's think about that. Right after creation came the fall. And when the fall came and Adam and Eve said, yeah, we want the powers of gods. Or the powers of God, we do not want to rest in his hand and in his provision. We want to take that power for ourselves. And they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I'm not saying that this Sumerian epic represents the truth, but it's interesting, some parallels in it. It says humans were to relieve the lower gods from their labor. They negotiated with the great gods to have this labor lifted from them. There was an ark. Atrahasis is the Sumerian version of Noah. He was given a dream by Enki, that's the Satan character. It goes into the construction of the ark, the boarding of the ark, the taking 2 of every animal onto the ark. By the way, this is not unique to them and to the Old Testament, but pretty much every culture whose writing has survived to this day and who has memories going back that far reports the same thing. There's a lot of really interesting, pseudo-archaeological material on the flood, and archaeological as well. But that's one that I do find pretty convincing. The great flood, the gods are hungry because there are no farmers left to bring sacrifices, so they decide to spare Atrahasis, even though he is a rebel. That is the explanation in this epic for why they kept one man alive and his family, and why he had an ark and was inspired to build it to survive the flood that was sent to wipe out humanity, was because they were hungry and they had no farmers left in the land to bring sacrifices. If they wiped everybody out, well, then I guess they just would stay hungry. Okay, so now I'm gonna scroll down. The sections that are replicated here include the complaints of the lower gods. They did forced labor. They bore drudgery. Great indeed was the drudgery of the gods. Their forced labor was heavy. Their misery too much. The 7 great Anunna, that's the Anunnaki, because the plural of Anunna is Anunnaki. There were 7 of them. Gods were burdening the Igigi gods with forced labor. So in their pantheon, there are the gods at the top. I guess that would be Satan and God and whoever else they have up there. And then underneath them are essentially legions of demons. The gods were digging the water courses. They were opening the canals. They were... the life of the land. They were dealing with the Tigris River and the Euphrates River, opening up springs, heaping up mountains, doing all these various things. Okay, then it goes on. Forced labor day and night. They were complaining, denouncing, muttering down in the ditch. Let us face up to our foreman, the prefect. He must take our heavy burden off of us. And then Enlil, council of the gods, the warrior, come, let us remove him from our dwelling. And they basically start a battle. Let us call for battle. Join the warfare. The gods heard his words and set fire to their tools. They put fire to their spaces, flame to their work baskets, and off they went, one and all, to the gate of the warrior Enlil's abode. And Enlil, remember, is the Yahweh character. Enki is the Satan character. All right, now I'm going to skip down, and I'm going to get to this part. The outcry was loud, with much clamor. We need a human, a man. Let him bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke. Let man assume the drudgery of the lower gods. They summoned to ask the goddess, blah, 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 da, da, da. Create a human being that he bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke. The task of Enlil, let man assume the drudgery of the gods. And it goes on from there. So in their mythology and their understanding of their incredible technological prowess, they did not view that as something that they cooked up on their own. In fact, they were, I guess, in a form of trembling and fear of these gods, that if they did not work hard enough, if they didn't build these things fast enough, if they did not build big cities and agriculture and irrigation ducts and all of that, that the gods would be very angry with them because they were slaves. That was their role, was to be the slaves of these demons, these lower level gods that the Sumerians had. So that fits exactly what I've been talking about, what I'm writing about in my book. I can't wait. I can't wait to put a copy of this book in your hands. I can't wait to read the book myself. I'm the one going, I can't wait to read my own book, because once I have all of this information assembled, it's every single day that I sit down to write up one chapter, or even the introduction to one chapter or the opening vignette for one chapter, I find myself discovering a whole new, I pull in a thread and then it unravels. And then the next thing I know, I've unraveled a whole tapestry, and I'm just looking going, oh my gosh, I need a new chapter. So I did that yesterday. Yesterday I created a whole new chapter in my book based on doing that. So it is fascinating. It's super fun. I could do this forever. I could just engage in the research without without the drudgery of figuring out how to take all the things I've discovered and either turn them into radio broadcast and figure out nice packaged ways to explain them, much less figuring out how to do that in words that are grammatically perfect and spelled correctly and have a logical flow. So that is my story of the Anunnaki. I will post a link to this epic. In fact, let me do that right now. Here we go. It is in my chat room, Katherine-Albrecht.com. That is the purpose of that chat room. So I can pop it up there. And soon I will be able to pop it right up into the YouTube window so you can read it on in there while I'm talking. All right. So speaking of my book, let me tell you the new chapter. Gotta grab it though. Hang on. There. I, by the way, now have 2 computer monitors and they're full. They're packed. But the good news is I can now see the chat room. I can now see the messages. If you want to message me here at KHNC, I can see your texts. I can see the phone screen if you want to call in. It's all visible, but I still occasionally struggle because there are so many things I want to talk about. Okay, so here's my new chapter. I think I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. My new chapter is titled Virtual Sin. Virtual Sin, bringing the direct experience of atrocity into the human psyche. I have one segment left of the show, so I think I can get started on this and tell you about it. What I discovered yesterday was something that sickened me in my spirit. I was doing research into video games, and I learned that video games are, my generation may not know this, but the video game industry is larger than the record industry, the film industry, and the television industry combined. It's enormous. The highest grossing video game has brought in $10 billion. I think that's probably an understatement, frankly, but let's just say for the sake of argument, it's 10 billion because the research I was reading said that. The highest grossing film in all of history, including all of history, since we've had film for the last 100 years, including the licensing, the merchandising, the the streaming, the making of VHS tapes, and DVDs, and all of the overseas licensing, everything is $3 billion. And if you account for inflation, it's $4.5 billion compared to $10 billion on a video game that many people here have never even heard of. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of influence. So yesterday I said, video games were a little subsection of a bullet point of one of my chapters called Megaphone for Madness. I was looking, that chapter looks at the development of mass media communications, looks at everything from the phonograph through to radio, through to television, movies, film, motion pictures, Hollywood, and then up through the internet and internet-based content, streaming content, Netflix, you name it. But little did I know that the video game industry was much bigger and much more important. All right, I'll talk about that when I come back. Stay tuned.
I've been hearing a lot about the LifeWave patches, and they sound amazing. And I'm thinking I want to try them for myself. But can you tell me how they work?
You wear the patch, which is about the size of a quarter, 12 hours a day, 12 on, 12 off. And the patch uses your body's own light and energy and copper peptides to reactivate the dormant stem cells in your body. Once a stem cell has been reactivated, it can be used by any of the cells in your body that need it, creating a healing and growth process you haven't experienced since your youth. So in a nutshell, this is how the LifeWave X39 patch works.
You can purchase the LifeWave patches by going to americasfreedomnetwork.com. Then click on the Natural Health Products button at the top of the page. That's americasfreedomnetwork.com.
Look, this product works, and you've got nothing to lose because there's a 100% money-back guarantee.
That's americasfreedomnetwork.com. Thank you.
Are you interested in becoming a KHNC Health and Wellness Ambassador? Want to earn a good, steady, extra income from home while helping people to look and feel better? Call 970-587-5003 and we'll give you all the details. Call us and let us show you how you can substantially increase your income working from home and get in on the ground floor of the KHNC Income Group. Call us at 970-587-5003 to hear more about this opportunity.
This is Rita Panahi, and I wanted to tell you that if you're not listening to Swamp Fight, you're simply not listening. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. here on AM 1360, Northern Colorado's best talk radio.
Want to comment on today's subject? You can. Call or text Katherine right now at 877-536-1360. That's 877-536-1360.
Don't gotta worry about a thing. Don't gotta worry about a thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable, on what is right and pure and lovely and admirable. Put into practice all you've learned, and the God of peace will be with you. Then you don't gotta worry about a thing.
Start dancing during the breaks. Yeah, if you guys could see me when my camera's off, that's what I'm doing sometimes. All right, I have in front of me the chapter of my book titled Virtual Sin. It's new. It just got created yesterday because I thought, well, I need to enlarge the video game section in my Megaphone for Madness communication chapter. Or maybe I need to drop it into the computer chapter. I have a chapter called Conjuring Computers, and I thought, maybe it goes in there. Or I have another chapter called Building a Body for the Beast. Does it go in there? Oh, no. So as I did pages and pages and pages and pages and pages, as this thing expanded and expanded, I said, this is its own chapter. And this morning, what I realized about video games, and I'm looking at the clock and don't have a whole lot of time, so we'll talk about video games tomorrow as well. But what I came to realize about video games that my generation does not realize, if you think about when my generation grew up and my parents' generation grew up, so I grew up in the 1970s, 1980s. The TV shows that I watched as a kid were the TV shows that were on in the 1970s, Sesame Street and Love American Style. There was some pretty raunchy content in there, but pretty tame by today's standards, definitely. Hollywood Squares, Gilligan's Island, the Brady Bunch. I grew up with all of that content. And I also grew up in an era where, as a kid, if you went into any kind of a store that sold dirty magazines, they were, they had all the magazines against a wall, and then the dirty magazines were either behind the counter or, they were out of reach of kids for sure. And they had black covers over them, so you couldn't even see the cover, even though the covers didn't have X-rated images. So we didn't really have access to prurient material. I like that word, prurient. We didn't have access to sexually explicit material or, whatever you want to call it, material of that nature. We couldn't find it. I think I've told this story on the show before. As a girl, I was in 5th grade. And one of my friends goes, I've got something really secret. Oh my gosh, you won't believe. And so we snuck and we went into her room. We looked around. We made sure we had the door shut. And she said, get a load of this. And she picks up her phone. Now, back then, the phones were, the rotary. They were heavy. You rented them from the phone company. There was only one phone company. They hadn't even broken up Ma Bell yet. And you went out there and you rented, I think it was like, I don't know, the equivalent of probably $25 a month of today's money. These heavy, if you hit somebody in the head, you crack open their skull, these heavy, heavy phones. And I remember when we upgraded and we had to go in and return our other ones, get our other ones and sign a contract or rent them. So it's that era of phones, plugged into the wall. We didn't have cell phones yet, of course. And there were no answering machines. So this was this super juicy thing my friend had found, that you could call the hospital, we were in Los Angeles. You could call some local health line, and you could actually, press 1 for it. It wasn't like that. It was like dial 3 for whatever. And of course, you dial it, it go. If you've never seen them, look them up if you don't know what I'm talking about. But there's rotary phones. You go, and then you'd let it go, and a spring would make it, and then you do it again. So if you wanted to dial a phone number, you had to do that multiple times until the phone would get the numbers and ring. So we called the number, and then it said, put in a 4 if you want information about heart disease. Put in a 5 if you want information about infectious diseases. Put it, pneumonia. And she said, but just wait. And it was like, put in 9 if you want information about menstruation. And we were all like, oh my gosh, we can actually. And so again, we're double checking, making sure, no parents are outside the door. And we punch in the number, not punching, we do the little dialing. And there's a recorded voice, which you never got that on the phone before. And the recorded voice was giving us information about getting your period. And we were like, oh. Okay, so contrast that level of innocence, naivete, innocence, that we knew we were dealing with something that isn't commonly discussed. We knew we were dealing with something that you kind of kept secret. Girls didn't talk about their periods, and certainly the big thing on all of our minds is, when am I going to get my period? Because that was the sign that you were becoming a young woman, but it was hush, hush, secret. So I contrast that with what's going on today, when in 5th grade, kids are viewing images online of things that I don't even want to name. Scripture actually tells me not to even name what they do in secret. There are really dark things out there. And so for us, for those of us who grew up in the era of being titillated by by a medical phone line about, a physiological process that's actually not all that exciting, To contrast that with what's out there now is just really so to get from that point to this point in my mind, and I'm again a child of the 1970s, to get from that point to here, I turn on TV. I went many years without having a TV, and as a graduate student at Harvard, I got a TV for the first time in a long time, and I turned it on just kind of as some downtime when I was not reading stacks and stacks of academic research. And I turned the TV on after not watching it for a couple of years, and I was scandalized at what was on TV in the early 1990s, to the point where I just got rid of it. I wasn't even watching it. And I was not, I don't know that I was particularly living as a Christian and you know, not opposed to it because it was immoral. It just seemed just yucky, empty and commercial, and just not I didn't want to watch it. And then years and years went by, and I got another TV years later and turned it on, and I was like, oh my God, like what has changed? And in recent years, I have flipped through, nowadays there's not really broadcast TV like there was then, but I've flipped through the contents on Amazon Prime, which I have, and I'm looking at it pretty scandalized because it seems like, I won't say all, but a lot of it is occult, like overtly. A lot of it is extremely violent, extremely sexual, extremely inappropriate, and night and day from, you know, the hiding of the of the Playboy magazines behind the black covers. I also do a lot of reading about media. Rather than actually watching media, I read about media. And I don't know if anyone out there has watched the TV show American Horror Story. I have not watched it, won't watch it, not gonna watch it. I think it would scar me deeply, but I read about it, and the things I read about happening in that TV show were just inconceivable to me that you would put that on film. Okay, so there's the background. So we've gotten to the point where now we've got Breaking Bad, we've got Dexter, where we're actually seeing serial crimes, serial murders being committed, and we're applauding the murderer. And so I'm reading about it. I'm not watching it. I'm just, because I don't really want to, but I read about this stuff and I'm like, ew, that's horrible. Well, little did I know that what has changed while I was busy worrying about the contents of media is that the enemy, through technology, has created an entirely different way of corrupting people. So from my childhood to what I was picturing childhood today being, which is all this awful content from television and movies filtering into people's heads, I was like, that's horrible. They're corrupting children by letting them see these things. Well, what I learned yesterday is that they're corrupting children by letting them actually participate in these things, to actually be the person who is being, having their eyes gouged out with a spoon, or to being the person doing the gouging out of eyes with a spoon. That, in my quote, in my book, and I'm not going to get to read this today, so I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. Virtual sin, here's my opening quote. All of them have a little quote in italics. But I say to you that whosoever looketh upon a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. That's Matthew 5:28. If it is true, and of course it is, because all scripture is God-inspired, God-breathed, and it's truth. If it is true, and it is, that if you imagine sexual immorality in your heart, if you lust and picture an immoral action, then what Jesus is telling us here is that we are guilty of that sin. That sin, it's not so much the use of your body. You know, he says it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but what comes out of his heart. It's not, or a woman, it's not the food that you put in your body that defiles you. It is the filth that comes out of your heart that defiles you. And if it is true, and it is, that imagining lustful behavior with another person without even, they don't even know, and you haven't touched them, you've done nothing but just think the thought, if that corrupts us and is the same as committing adultery, what is gouging out someone's eyes with a spoon? What is murdering entire groups of people? What is committing virtual rape, which people are doing in these movies. So that's why there's a whole new chapter. All right. At a time, I could go on for another hour, and I will. Tomorrow, I will be back, and we'll talk about video games. And I'll read you my opening vignette, and I want your opinion. I need you guys to tell me, am I going too far? Yeah, it's always a question I ask. All right, see you then. God bless you. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.